Hey everyone, I'm Lindsay Turner. I'm here with my co-host Amanda Raquel Martinez, and this is the Bad Pastor podcast where we talk about astrology, faith, and building something new from the broken pieces of life. Mandy, great to see you. How are you today?
Oh, good. A little broken. Okay, how about you?
Well, just that's the idea, right? That's the theme.
Yeah, it's very
What's
on
going
brand.
What's going on? Mandy sent me a photo of herself with an ice pack on her head before we got started, and so I would love for everyone to know what happened to you, Mandy.
Oh my gosh. Well, I came home to my parents' house, I should say, and I it's just been chaos since I walked in, and my father suggested, "Hey, why don't you take we should go on a bike ride. Let's do that," which we've never done in my entire life. Like, my parents took off my training wheels when I was 8, and then they were like, "You know what? I fell once, I cried," and they were like, "We're giving the bike away." So I taught myself in the pandemic in 2020 how to ride a bike. And then the next day I rode 40 miles with one of my best friends because I'm crazy,
Oh
Capricorn
my
Sun.
gosh, you taught yourself how to ride a bike as an adult, and then the
Yeah,
next day rode it how far?
40 miles, 20
No,
each way.
that's amazing.
It was really dumb because my friend was like, "Oh, whose bike did you borrow?" And I was like, "Oh, my friend Bailey's." And I was like, "Just so you know, I might be a little slow because I've never done this." And he's like, "What, a long bike ride?" And I was like, "No, bike." This was your idea. And I was like, "I know, I'm trying to feel something." Because it was around this time last year when the election was upcoming. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had just died 4 years ago, not last year. And I was
Wow.
like really depressed. And so I was like, but as you say, it's a Wednesday, it's Mercury's day. It's a great day for a bike ride. That's something that I remember you saying. And so I was like, you know what? My dad's in tune with the astrology and he doesn't even know it. But then when we got back, he dropped the garage door on my head by accident. And so
Wah,
that's why the
wah.
that's why the ice
Ouch.
pack came in. So, but we're okay.
Uh,
We're making it barely, but we're making it. How about you? How's it going over there? It seems like you had a pretty interesting morning too.
oh my gosh. I'm so inundated. I am sort of like I was thinking like what's going on in the world? And I'm like, I literally don't even know because I am working on so many things and just like trying to keep my head above water. Again, this like theme of there's so much going on in the water signs and like flooding and just being like, I mean, we literally had floods in New Mexico in this last week. So if you're familiar with
Oh,
Roswell, which is like the alien, kind of capital,
yeah.
right, of the world, maybe. Like everything's alien themed in Roswell. It's super cute. But yeah, they had like major flash flooding. People died. It was really, I mean, it rained all weekend here and thunderstorm. And it was just like really atypical. So yeah, that was disconcerting. And then also I'm working on a ton of stuff right now, which I wanted to just share before I forget. Um, one is that we have our exorcism webinar that starts next week. I mean, by the time I get this out, it'll be just a couple days after this. So it starts on Monday. What is Monday the 20,
28th.
28th? Thank you. Monday the 28th. And it's a 4-part webinar series. We're going to meet Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right before Halloween. And then the Monday after Halloween, right before the election. And so this is a series where we're going to be talking about spirit possession and demons and how do we work with the parts of ourselves and the world that feel bad or even evil. How do we respond? And how do we have a theology of exorcism? How do we think about it on a psychological level? Um, I had a new client last week who was like, I feel really scared about that you're like teaching on exorcism, like kind of, are you safe? And I was like, oh yeah, totally. I'm so sorry that that is scary, that I scared you by teaching on that. But I think it's one of those topics that the church has kind of set off limits from people. And I think part of my ministry is being like, no, no, like let's give these theologies and rituals back to people so that they can use them in their lives. And this topic of exorcism is really important because we do have encounters with evil and we don't necessarily have frameworks for like, how do we think about that? How do we work
Yeah.
with that? Like, and the parts of ourselves that are destructive, right? Like we all have parts of self that are maybe trying to protect us or trying to safeguard something that we have, but not doing it in like the most constructive way for us or the most like mutual relating way. And so I think that this series is going to be really cool and instrumental in helping people think about those things and parts of self and parts of community differently. So
So cool. So
lot to get ready
cool.
for. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Um, and then the other big launch that I we just launched last weekend, our devotional for Advent. So Sarah Noel and I, this is our 4th year doing our Advent devotional. So this is a daily devotional during the season of Advent, which this year actually does start on December 1st. It doesn't always, so it's going to line up really well with your store-bought calendars. um, and we engage the astrology each day. We look at the scripture for each day. And yeah, I've just loved doing this project every year with Sarah. And so right now that's available for pre-sale until November 1st for 20% off. So if you want to get in on that deal, get in on it early, don't forget to go sign up. And all of this is on my website, badpastor.me/store. So you can sign up for that. And then the third thing that I'm preparing for is November 9th. I'm doing this is my third annual year ahead forecast that I'm doing with Samuel Reynolds, Michael Bartlett, and Jonah Emerson Bell. And these are all astrologers that are local to me. These are my like Santa Fe brothers. And we've been doing a year ahead forecast the last few years together. And so, if you're in Santa Fe, we have 20 seats available to come to that in person, but we're also going to be live streaming. And so you can come and yeah, get the scoop on the year ahead. It's a long forecast. We do about 2.5 hours, and we're calling it deep dive into 2025. 2025, the astrology is bananas. So I am I'm looking forward with bated breath, and we'll be treating it really thoroughly on Saturday, November 9th. So yeah, and please join us for any or all of those offerings. Yeah, I'm really excited about all of them. But yeah, I've been so in the weeds getting ready
Yeah,
for
you're
all of
like doing all the things all the time
yeah.
with all the people too, which is really cool. But like, how do
Yes.
you keep track of all of it?
I literally have a wall covered in sticky notes. That is my it look really it doesn't look sane if you like and that's fine, like sanity is overrated, but yeah, it's a there's a wall, you can't even see it, it's off camera, but there's a wall of sticky notes. I feel like this is my 12th house Virgo, right? Like
I
you
was gonna
can't see
ask,
it. It's like all my organization system is out of sight. You would
but
never
it's very much in the mind.
exactly. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I'm just curious, how was the full moon for you? And yeah, is there anything that's feeling like particularly loud in the astrology? We're in Scorpio season now. So we definitely should talk about that today.
Oh my gosh, so many things. Yeah. I mean, Aries is in my fourth house of family, home, foundations. And it's a bit rebellious in terms of like breaking from tradition of like what family looks like, what foundation looks like. So it's interesting that I'm today in my childhood bedroom that everyone can see. Um, but
Was that a
specifically
nice
on the,
sponge paint treatment, by the way?
oh yeah, hand sponged by yours truly.
So what year did you hand sponge that wall?
20 2004.
Oh, 20
So
years
it's
ago,
yeah, 20 years ago. Oh my god.
not
I
10
was like,
years
20
ago.
years ago. No, that
I
was
hate to
20.
break it to you. Yeah, that was 20 years ago.
That's wild. No, it's crazy. I've I feel it's a little tender for me too, the full moon, because I've had like a pretty deep friend breakup. like someone from high school that I've been friends with for almost 20 years. I mean, uh, she said she needed space, but just knowing her character, I'm probably never going to hear from her again. Or if I do,
Oh,
it's going to be a really long
no.
time from now. And it just, yeah, the whole thing is not great. But, you know, I think kind of what it's been for me is like, I'm sick of bullies. I'm sick of people being mean. And I'm not really here for letting people bully me around anymore.
I
And I'm
love it.
standing up for myself more, but it's hard because when you really care and love someone, I'm like, I could break up with romantic partners, whatever, and I mean, I'll shed a little tear and then it'll be fine. But the friendship breakups are hard. They hurt like way more for
Yeah.
me, you know?
Yeah. They hurt a lot. Underrated pain.
Very underrated pain. But
Yeah.
that being said, I kind of had to like go in a focus because Capricorn rising, they love a work wormhole. And I had a performance of like an excerpt of my one woman show, Work in Progress, on Monday night.
Right. How did that
Yeah.
go?
It it went a lot better than I thought it would. I didn't want it to. I was like, hope no one comes. Some people like a lot of people came. It was sold out, but only like 4 or 5 of my people. So that was like great because I had a support network, but of people that if it was really bad, they were gonna be gentle with me. Um,
No.
but it wasn't bad, I guess, because I mean, I like clowned for the first 5 minutes and everybody was laughing. And then by the end, everybody was crying. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want
Yes.
to make them laugh and then I want to make them cry and then I
Well,
want to make them
that's
laugh again.
right. That's
So,
right.
yeah.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, it helped. It definitely helped take my mind off of things a little bit, but also like, also with Libra season wrapping up on Monday, it's funny because that's my 10th house of like career, public, vocational life, all that stuff. So it's interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. Like I had this long career as a theater artist and now I'm like, now what? What do I do? Where do I go? I don't know. So still
Wow.
navigating that. How about you? What's happening in your world? How's
Mm.
the full moon for you?
I think that full moon, I mean, it truly was just such a culmination of losing that, what I believe was a pregnancy. All signs pointed toward it. Of course, when you're that early and if the pregnancy isn't taking, tests don't pick it up. So, I think that full moon was literally right on my descendant, which is the most like the point that is most connected to partnership. And so of course that whole thing brought up a lot of questions and discussions around yeah, planning for children and all of that with my partner. Um and what's also, I think, was a cool expression of that moon for me was that I have been doing some research for the Astrology podcast. So, Chris Brennan invited me to do some research he's doing episodes on the houses right now. And so it was very funny because the first episode that I researched for him was for the third house. And what's amazing is I am in third house year by this technique called annual profection, which I mentioned on the last episode. And I'll explain a little bit more what the annual profections are because they're a really cool timing technique. So basically, when we're born, we are in a first house annual profection. Um, Technically, you go by sign, but because I use whole sign houses, it's one for one, the signs in the houses. So, when you're born, you're in like a rising sign year. And you're in a first house year if you use the whole sign house system. So each year you progress through the signs and houses, and every 12 years you make a full circle. And what's really cool about this timing technique is that often the houses and the signs that are being activated for that year really do set a lot of the themes for the year or the major events of the year. I'm 38, and so 38 is a third house year. And so been a big emphasis on my neighborhood. So I started actually the day of my birthday, we went bowling, and we've been bowling
Oh
at
my
the local
gosh.
bowling alley almost every week.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so there's just been these things like, my husband, AJ, joined a local basketball league that has like my tattoo artist and my old boss. And so I went to one of their their first game last week. And that was super fun. Very just third house activities, like your local community. And then also, communicating, research, writing is a big third house thing. So it was very funny that Chris invited me to do this research for the third house during a third house year, and that was, like, the first episode that he invited me to research for him, and so that episode just came out, and it's 8 hours long.
Oh my
It's
god.
amazing. I really love and respect Chris. He's my teacher, and also I think that he's devoting his life to leaving as much, like, free and accessible and really high quality astrological, like, knowledge and research to the public, and I think it's wonderful. I mean, people are like, why is he so long-winded, or why does he spend so much time?" And I'm like, "'Cause I think he really cares and feels really devoted to being thorough, and I really appreciate that about him, and it was really fun doing research. I spent a lot of time on Maya Angelou. That was a big one that I did on the episode, and also Audre Lorde. And so those 2 examples are lifted up in the episode, and, yeah, so I just feel, like, really proud of that work, and I think a little bit too about, not only Aries being my 7th house, but kind of, um, illuminating this this trigon in my chart of relationships, because the fire signs in my chart are in the 3rd, 7th, and 11th house, and those are all houses of relationship, right? Your 3rd house is like the love the ones you're with. It's like your neighbors, your siblings, right? Those types of relationships. The 7th house is partnership, and the 11th house is like friendships. So I'm in this 3rd house activation. I had a 7th house full moon, right? And then here I am, like, collaborating on this big document with a lot of, like, really amazing astrologers, like, doing research, and that was for the 4th house. So I'm doing the 4th house episode as well, with him. And so, yeah, it's been really gratifying, and I felt like that full moon, was really an illumination of like, "Oh, I'm kind of partnering, with these folks, I'm collaborating, I'm doing research," and yeah. So, that was a highlight of last week for me, even though it was kind of a difficult week, dealing with all of the medical and emotional things that were going on as well.
Yeah, lots ups and downs, which is a fire nature of fire, right? It
Mhm.
burns bright, but it can also burn you.
That's right, or just get, like, extinguished, like,
Out.
enough.
Done. No, it's so funny you're talking about is it profection year? I always say it
Yeah,
wrong.
profection, so profection, so you profect, you advance from the 1st house each year of your life and go around the chart.
Yeah, I think because I remember hearing you talk about it last week, and so I was curious, and I was like, I think I'm in an 11th house profection year at 34. And I was like, well, that also makes sense with what you were saying, like the 4th, 7th, and 11th houses having that
Mm.
trifecta going on.
3rd
And I'm like,
3rd, 7th, and
third,
11th. Yeah,
3rd, and 11th, my
yeah.
bad.
No, it's
But
okay, it's complex.
so many things happening. But I definitely am feeling like the collective communities, like who are your people, who you're leaving, who's staying, what kind of community. I've been really interested in like, what do I want to build in this season of my life and where and with who? And it's been a question that continues to come up. And so it's interesting, like seeing that and then knowing that I'm in this. specific profection year of like, oh, it's like reflecting back at me. So that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and you're right, it's an 11th house year, so yeah, there and you have, Scorpio in your 11th house, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's an activation right now of Scorpio because we're in Scorpio season and it's your Scorpio year, 11th house. So yeah, these themes of like friendship and your network and also, right, think about the 11th house is what holds the stars that are about to move into the 10th house. If you look at the way that the diurnal motion works in the chart. So we have like everything rises in the first and then it keeps moving up through the sky. And it might be confusing because the houses are numbered, it would seem like backwards, right? Like, why would the stars move from the first to the 12th to the 11th to the 10th? But that's how the sun and all the stars move throughout the day. The numbers are telling you what order the constellations, the signs, and the planets that the houses are holding, what order they're going to appear next on the horizon, on the eastern horizon. So the first house is like this is what's on the horizon. The second house is what's about to be on the horizon. The third house is after that. The fourth is after that. So that's why the houses appear to be like numbered backwards in the chart because they're telling us about what order they're going to appear next on the horizon. So the planets during the day move. It seems like they're moving backward through the houses, but it's actually we're looking at how the houses are moving up and over the ascendant, or the signs are moving up and over the ascendant.
That's wild. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a kind of advanced, but it's fun to start thinking about if you're, if you're an enthusiast, right? Like how things are set up and why they're set up that way. Yeah. So the 11th house, right? All of those stars are about to move into the 10th. So the ancients called the 11th house the house of good spirits because it was a place where things got lifted and supported into the highest position in the house. And so if you have 11th house placement, so you're having an 11th house activation, right? Um, it can also be about hope. And what are your hopes? What are you trying to lift into the highest place in your life right now? So, and I love that friendship and hope are connected in the house system, right? That they both belong to the 11th house because what are what are the point of friends if not to like lift each other up and to give us hope, right? I mean, that's so often that's how, friends are like keeping me going and keeping me alive in this world. Like it's what's worth living for.
Especially right now. Woo!
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everything going on. It's good to have we need that. We need the collective. We need communities. We need to show up for people and have them show up for us. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, thank you for explaining that because 11th house always felt more elusive to me in its understanding than even the 12th house, which is supposed to be more
Mhm.
subtler. But I was like, I understand it in a feeling kind of way, the 12th house. But 11th house, for whatever reason, maybe because it's in Scorpio for me, so that's why it feels elusive. And I don't have a ton. Yeah,
Yeah,
lots of deep stuff coming up this Scorpio season already for me, and we're in like what day 2 ish.
yeah, yeah. It's a profound time, right? Where I mean, Scorpio is really about getting underneath of things. And if you just think about the animal representative of Scorpio, right? Remember the word zodiac has the root zoo in it. And so zodiac is like zoo, the circle, like the zoo circle, right? So all of these animals and figures, scorpions are the representative of Scorpio. And scorpions hide under rock. Like that is primarily where they live, is underneath things, underneath the surface of things. Or if you're unlucky, right, in your boot or something like that, if you live in the desert. Um, and I think that there's a strong connection to the darkness with Scorpio because of, I once read that scorpions not only hate the sunlight, but they also hate the moonlight. Like any light is like, ooh, I do not shine on me, right? And it's interesting to have, like Scorpio is square to Leo, which is ruled by the sun, right?
Mhm.
And so people with like Leo and Scorpio placements might feel this angle, this square inside themselves, but you can also see it when you see like really Leonine and really Scorpion people interact is like Leo is ruled by the sun. It wants to shine, shine, shine the light. It doesn't really care what the light lands on. Some people love it, some people hate it, right? And Scorpio is like, I do not want any light on me. Like, I really want to stay hidden. And so you'll notice like people, I think especially people with Scorpio rising tend to be a little self-protective, a little like, harder to get to know, a little shielded. They're kind of under their rock. But then of course, if you have any other placements in Scorpio, that's also going to be an area of self that maybe you feel a little bit more guarded or secretive or protective around.
Oh, yeah. I love a Scorpio moon. I feel like I know a lot of them. And
Mhm.
in the place of emotions, so guarded, like
Yeah.
holding those cards close to the chest, but then can have like these really profound, deep intellectual conversations, even if they're still figuring out whether or not they can trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the moon in the sign of Scorpio, we say is in full. And so that this is in the ancient schema of the dignities. Um and as I mentioned before, planets in fall or in exile, right, have non-normative resources and have to kind of like figure it out. And so the moon and fall, people with moon and Scorpio um, often have had really difficult experiences with being nurtured or not being nurtured, right, by the primary nurturer in their life, which we associate with mothers. But of course, that's not always how that works. I think that because the moon represents our emotions and our body and the way that the body keeps the score, right? However problematic that book may or may not be.
Yeah.
Um, that there are these real, like, emotional and somatic experiences that people with Moon and Scorpio have in life that can be just very intense, raw, difficult, painful, tragic experiences that affect them really deeply. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Scorpio moons can be so guarded, but can also be so compassionate and really like have this well of empathy and relatability and kindness because they have had these really raw experiences in life and are able to connect with people and not be afraid of it, right? Like they're in the darkness. They're not afraid of the darkness. So um I think that that's also, it's sort of like if your eyes are adjusted to the darkness and someone shines a light on it, it's like, "Ooh, I'm used to being down here in the depths, like, don't take me out of it," and so I really see Scorpio moons that way, and I think Scorpio moons need to be treated with an amount of, respect and awareness, right? That often, like, once you cross a Scorpio moon, there is no going back, like, and so I think that that can be helpful to know someone's moon sign and to know, yeah, if someone has a Scorpio moon, like tread carefully and cautiously because they have been cut, and we don't want to like rub salt in that wound.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, so then I guess my question to you is, since we're talking about Scorpio, all things Scorpio right now, with this upcoming season, is there anything to keep in mind? I mean, it feels like when we hit a season of a sign for those 30, 31 days, we're living in the world of that sign. There are other planets that are occupying that sign as well. And so each sign I feel like has a lesson to teach us or something that we can
Mhm.
kind of navigate, work through. And so I guess just curious, like, what your thoughts are about this season and what
Yeah.
some of those lessons might be.
That's a great question. I think Scorpio, like we have the new moon in Scorpio on November 1st, and it's at 9 degrees Scorpio. So if you have any planets in fixed signs, so Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, or Taurus, around 9 degrees might be a particularly poignant moment for you, this new moon. Um, but remember, the moon's in fall in Scorpio. So when we have the new moon in Scorpio, it's a fallen moon. So I think that the new moon in Scorpio reminds us of our tenderness, reminds us of the places that we protect and shield. Um, and sometimes it's important that we keep those places covered and protected and shielded. It's like a bandage, right? When, yeah, like you get cut or something and you want to protect it and keep like stuff from out of it. Um, and it also may be a time to consider, okay, like, is it healed enough that the bandage comes off, right? Like, I think there are these questions of vulnerability and protection when we get into Scorpio season and the new moon. And like, what are the cycles of wounding and healing? And then also even questions of infection, right? Like wounds that maybe we would rather not tend to and just pretend that they're not there and ignore. And that's often a way that wounds become infected or don't heal properly. Um, and so really, yeah, like kind of getting into places that might be uncomfortable or even infected, like for us on personal levels, but also systemically, right? Like thinking about, I mean, there are some pretty obvious wounds that we're dealing with on a global level right now. And infections and things that, really need to be taken care of and cleaned out and stitched up and, um, tended to.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, with it being autumn, with it being the fall, and this time of year with Samhain and Dia de los Muertos, it's like
Mhm,
the veil is thin, and we're thinking about death and grieving in a very visceral kind of way, seeing
mhm,
the leaves turn, all of it. And so I definitely associate Scorpio with this mood, right?
mm,
We talk about the brooding and the mood, but it is very much exploring the grief and the shadow side of ourselves in order to let the light in, hopefully, because you need
yeah,
both. You need I think the most dangerous thing is to deny the shadow and is
mm,
to not actually like sit with all the things that are lurking in the dark,
mhm,
right? And I think definitely Scorpio season is a time of year where I am sitting with myself a little bit deeper. It's always it's always the water sign seasons. I'm telling you, Scorpio, Pisces season. Like I love March. That's a whole other thing. I'll get into at some other point. It's my favorite month. And Cancer season too. It's just always so deep. But like you were saying, we've got so many things in water right now that it's just the time. 'Tis the season.
yeah. I I love that you brought up Halloween and Dia de Muertos, and in the church, there's All Saints Day, right? And all of these happen like in quick succession with one another during Scorpio season. And um, I had this thought last year. We set up an altar actually over my fireplace for the dead, for the dead in our lives. Um, and I remember standing there and like weeping and thinking about the moon ruling Cancer and its association with tears and crying. Um, and the moon in Scorpio in the sign of its fall, and the tears literally falling like down your face. The moon is a planet of remembrance. The moon reflects the sun's light. And so when we're looking at the moon, we're looking at a memory. of the sun's light, which I think is such a beautiful and poetic way to think about her.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and so in Scorpio season, if we're thinking about like the new moon in Scorpio and being on November 1st, right, which is right around like Dia de Muertos and All Saints Day and Halloween, um, we're having this moment of remembering the dead and the tears falling. You're right, like, it's so important in Scorpio that we face our shadows, that we face the dead, that we face our own death, right? That we remember that we have a relationship with things and bodies and memories that are literally underneath us, right? Under the soil. And that so much of life happens because of what's going on in the shadows and underground and there's so much like support and connection there. So yeah, I feel like Scorpio season really does give us the courage to kind of face all of that.
Oh, yeah, and I living in Chicago, there's a lot of Mexican culture, and I'm Puerto Rican, so I didn't really know much about Mexican culture until I moved to Chicago, but Day of the Dead is a huge thing,
Mm,
and, setting up an ofrenda, which is, like, for the like you were talking about, having an altar for those who are no longer with us,
yeah.
and, I was when I did this show on Monday, the last piece was by one of my friends, Wendy, and it was her at puppeteering, someone setting up an ofrenda, and, but it was someone who had died. And so it was this idea that the dead actually also do their own offerings for the living.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, which was something interesting to me that I had never really thought of, that the people who are no longer with us having their own celebration,
Mm,
for those in the living world. And then she did some Mexican folk dancing all while in the puppet. Actually, it was incredible. And the puppet was a skeleton. So, uh,
wow.
yeah, really powerful piece. But just thinking about how, even when we're not, those who are no longer with us, they still celebrate us and how we celebrate them, and that it goes in both directions. And so just thinking about that and thinking about how we're connecting um to death around us and also to life around us too.
That is so cool. Yeah, people often talk about this Halloween time and Scorpio season is where like the veil is thin, right? The thinning of the veil. And if we think about a veil, maybe in a bridal sense, right? The veil kind of covers the face, but you can still kind of see through it. And there's something about a veil that's both meant to hide and also meant to be lifted. And I really feel like just the image of the scorpion hidden under the rock, right? Like you can lift it and see what's under there. It might be a little scary, a little spooky, a little creepy, but we're still curious, right? We still want to look under the rock, and the veil is maybe what separates the living from the dead, or the consensus reality from something obscure or something different. And I think that image of a veil is very scorpionic. And that what an amazing story to think about it kind of like going both ways, right? Like we are lifting the veil from the side of the living into the side of the dead, but maybe they're doing the same thing as well or in the same time.
Yeah. Well, and even when you were talking about Scorpio risings, that they're protective, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I was thinking through the Rolodex of the Scorpio risings that I know, and I was like, there is a veil. Like that was the first word that came up, and I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not gonna interject too much, but that was the word that came up, and I think it's so true to everything that you're speaking right now, um, that I had not really thought of, that they're there, they're present. It's not an absence, it's a presence, but it's what are you willing to uncover and what are you
Mhm.
sweeping under the rug, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Makes me think of, like, The Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Well, if you know Scorpio risings and they post, like, selfies or whatever, their hair is always like, how like, it's so funny. Like, I'm so mysterious and sexy and, like, here's my hair covering my face like you can barely see me. Yeah, or they are just, like, never on on the main page, right? It's like always photos of other things and other people, but they always remain behind the lens.
You're seeing
And
them without actually seeing them.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing I'll say about Scorpio, so the episode that I did on the astrology podcast was on Saturn and music, and particularly the billboard. And when Saturn moves through the signs, my kind of theory is that pop culture adopts the archetype of whatever sign Saturn is in and kind of plays it out. And so I use the billboard as uh, the case study, right? It was like looking at the billboard through Saturn through the signs. And what is so amazing when Saturn was in Scorpio, we get songs like Thriller. Um, oh yeah, like there's so it's amazing. All these like really spooky songs. Like if you do the billboard from like, oh, I want to say 1984 and
Or
five. Yeah, that's like they're like perfect for a Halloween party, right? I think you get the police, every breath you take. Like there's just this like very spooky quality to a lot of the music. There Ghostbusters, the
oh my god.
movie and the theme song, right? Like came out when there's something strange in the neighborhood. And and then we also got a lot of movies with, training montages in them. So, Chariots of Fire, Rocky. So, I also associate that with Scorpio is the sort of, like, getting up before the sun to, like, train and strategize and defeat your opponents, right? Like, there's something very, like, strategic and undercover about Scorpio. Again, there's that veil.
That's so crazy. Training and like battling the demons, the inner demons too, of like
Mhm.
insecurity. Like, am I good enough? Am I all of these things coming up? But every time I think about that, I think about Rocky just running up those stairs,
Mhm.
persevering, pushing
Saturn
through.
and Scorpio.
That's wild. That's
It's
crazy that there's
amazing.
so much creepy music around that time that just really like hits.
I wanna mention that, we looked at a scripture for today, and I just or for this week, right, for the 27th, week of the 27th, and the passage from Mark, it's Jesus healing, Bartimaeus or making him not blind anymore, and I will say that these passages are really difficult when they, focus on, ability or disability and Jesus kind of healing ability or disability, and I think that there are some, you know I'm not someone who is blind and have never experienced that. And I think that there are so many theologians who are doing theology around ability and disability. And I think what I'll do is when I share this, like in the show notes, just put some folks that I recommend to engage on this topic because while I know that there are people doing really good work around ability and disability and Christian faith and the Bible, I don't feel like I have a super comfortable command of the topic. And I would rather just like refer people to those folks to like read and study about that. Because disability is a really complicated thing, right? And people with different disabilities or people with the same disabilities have different understandings of it and different perceptions, and they connect to their faith in different ways around it. And so I certainly don't want to draw any hard and fast conclusions, but I also don't feel like I'm in a great position to treat this Mark 10 passage with like everything that it deserves in the amount of time that we have. Talk about
Hey,
boundaries, right?
yeah, and also like, like taking like reclamation of agency also seems to be the theme, right? So I think
Mhm.
just being able to say, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And I could do that, but I don't want to. It's a form of
Mhm.
just being standing in the power that you have, which I think
Yeah.
is a lesson we could all benefit from.
Yeah, and I hope someone hears this and who hasn't thought of that, and for the first time is like, "Oh, like, passages about blindness and deafness and disability in the Bible are super complicated when we're thinking about them in our current time period and just in general and the ways in which, people with disabilities experience really intense marginalization in our current society. And so, yeah, there's some amazing theologians speaking to it. So I'm going to post about it. Um, and I think that about covers it for today. If there I loved the really nice treatment that we gave to Scorpio. And I think next week we can just talk about Mars opposite Pluto because that is a fairly pronounced transit that we have coming up, but it's not until November 3rd. So maybe next week we'll talk about that. Anything else, Mandy?
No, I'm just always so grateful to share space with you and talk in this way. I learned so much talking about the astrology, and also it's nice to feel a little less crazy. Not that I'm
Mm,
blaming the astrology, but when we understand what's happening around us, it makes us feel a little bit more in on the joke that is life. That's kind of
mm.
what it feels like these days.
As above, so below. And maybe you should run and grab that ice cream truck.
Oh my gosh, you hear
I love it. All
Oh,
right. Well, thank you, Star Pals, for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you next week, God willing, and the creek don't rise.